Welcome to the Inspired Evolution, and today it is such a gift to be here because we have the vibes from Neeta Bhushan. Neeta, how are you?
I'm so good.
It's Dr. Neeta Bhushan for those in the house. Welcome.
Oh my gosh, it's so awesome to be here.
It is such a treat to have you here.
And such an honor to be here.
Don't say that. It is a blessing. For those that you're going to find out a lot more about this woman. It's going to get really good over the next half an hour, 40 minutes.
We'll have a lot of fun.
Yeah. So those tuning into Neeta for the first time, right? Just a quick little background piece for you. Neeta is a former dentist, right? Turned educator. She's a self-proclaimed wellness geek and best-selling author of 2 books, right? Emotional Grit, and she also co-authored the new release, which is the Book of Coaching. Great little book, guys. Highly recommend it. She left her $1 million healthcare practice to pursue her now breakthrough research on leadership, empathy, and resilience. Can't wait to talk about resilience, which is endorsed by leaders and organizations all across the globe. Her unique perspective on human dynamics and behavioral psychology is inspired by lessons of resilience from her own early life as an orphan, and we're really going to talk about that. She's a master NLP practitioner, trained in DISC and MBTI. She works with high performers, coaches, and entrepreneurs through an Accelerate program, which is a 6-month intensive business incubator. She's determined to crack the silly for entrepreneurs and leaders alike through a new funny spoof series called The School of Grit, which is actually really, really entertaining. She really takes I'm just going to go ahead and say this, she takes the piss on a lot of things. It's borderline confronting, but you're like, yeah, she just went there. Like, it's really amazing that you have that energetic vibe to it. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. That's good. That's good feedback.
So I think let's just start there, right? Like the energy of just keeping it lighthearted.
Well, it's one of the facets for, you said resilience. It's one of the facets for building resilience. Yeah. We take things so seriously. And if we were just talking about being in the corporate cog or like the traditional matrix of the world. And that is a very serious pursuit, coming from the lineage of becoming something in the traditional field, like a doctor or a dentist. Yeah. There was no room for play. I mean...
Heads down, thumbs up.
Let's memorize everything under the sun and more. And you feel or you find that when things get tough in life, when stressors come up, when challenges come up, when adversity rises... if we take ourselves way too seriously, we're just going to burst. And we see that happening over and over and over again. And so this was it was one of the callings that I had and one of the gifts that I was so able to materialize this year and say, you know what, let's step into that more. Let's give other entrepreneurs permission to also step into that silliness because... we're all transforming, humans, and we're all elevating human potential. And what does that look like when you're actually just being silly and playful? And so, of course, this spoof series of the School of Grit TV came out.
I love it because entrepreneurs are fundamentally creative, right? And just when you're having fun is when you're most creative.
Totally.
And I absolutely adore just that you bringing that awareness to the space because, like you said, a lot of it is just it can be so intense. It's like how much am I going to make this month? What's going to happen with that? And entrepreneurs can be really intense to be around. It's money rules your whole life, and you just don't focus on anything else.
It rules everything.
Yeah, and it's it can be really intense. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and also the success parameter has always been around how much do you make? And nobody really talks about success being happiness.
Anything beyond
or
financial.
Right.
Yeah.
So now we're starting to crack the code in a very lighthearted way because humor brings so many people together.
Okay, so this episode is definitely going to be a bit chop suey. I really want to get into your story, but at the same time, there's just something that you talk about the parameters to happiness, and how do I avoid that? And parameters to success, and then you mentioned happiness, and how do I skip over that, right? So parameters to success, because I definitely want to touch on happiness, but I obviously know, like, I thought this was going to happen about 20 minutes into the episode, but here we are, boom. Serve love, like, your parameters for success you want to share?
Yeah, well, I'm wearing it right now. It's basically our mantra. My husband and I udge it. And, it's really when you're coming from a place of your authentic truth, honestly, with intention to just serve without any expectations. And just from your heart, because I think a lot of times, we service a lot of entrepreneurs that are kind of going through their journey, in several different ways. And we work with a lot of coaches who are also serving a lot of people, speakers, trainers, leaders, that kind of caliber.
People like me.
Who are also doing amazing things in the world, right?
Yeah.
And I think that because we get so consumed with all of the things that we have to do, all of the things that, we need in order to build another business, or what my next chapter is going to look like now that I've left corporate, or, what is really my calling, we forget to serve from a place of love. Yeah. And we even take our genuine gifts for granted because we're like, oh, that's not good enough. No, no, I think I need to do more work on that. I need to get 5 more certifications on that before I really share what my truth is. And you don't realize that what your unique gifts are, that's you serving love. That's you serving love on a daily basis with so much passion, with so much enthusiasm, with just no expectations, because it's just coming from the heart. And I think that if more of us can drop into it, which is why it's become our mantra.
Yo. Love that mantra. Borderline adopted myself. It's just like, that's the operating system now.
I mean, it really can be an inspired evolution of our next level of humanity. And I think that would be the greatest gift that we can give the planet. So
it's such a blessing. So how does so let's dive into it. Let's peel in. So where does one come from being a dentist, owning their practice, and growing up, with, an ethnic culture, right? And then, all of a sudden just going, nah, I'm just going to serve life. Can we run through this story a little bit? Let's get some context here.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, I'd have to go back quite a few years, but so I was born and raised in Chicago. Yeah. And, to immigrant parents. And my father was from India. Yeah. My mom was from the Philippines. And, they came to the U.S. for, a better life. Yeah, and they wanted to live the American dream. And so I was, first generation from immigrant parents that were working, 9 to 8 p.m. daily. And I was the eldest of 3. I had 2 younger brothers.
Nice.
And so
being the oldest, such a decent amount of pressure in that, It's just you put me right in the right spot. Thanks, Mum.
Right, paving the way, being the black sheep, of
course. As if the pressure from above wasn't enough. Right. Now it's pressure from below to lead as well.
Everything. So, I actually, things kind of changed in my life because I had to grow up really fast. At 10 years old, we found out my mom had cancer. And so that really started to shape and inform a lot of the lessons of resilience I teach now. And so it was, 10 years old, I'm starting to make chai and cooking for the family. My mom is really sick. My dad, being a traditional Indian man, doesn't really know how to cope with kind of losing his wife. Yeah. So lots of all of these dynamics there. And, during my formative years, my adolescent years, my teen years, I ended up losing my mom at 16, and then I lost my brother at 17, and then my father again to lung cancer at 19. So it was challenge, adversity, challenge to build resilience. So entering my 20s, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going through this deep tunnel and this deep hole of, I don't even know what to call it, but I have a younger brother that I've inherited who is 14 years old, who's kind of like my son at this point. And we had a very ambiguous relationship because, he was so young and he had seen all of this tragedy, and I had to really put on my parental figure, weird face while I was going through my teen years. So that really made my programming of educational success, drive, perfection, getting it all done, that was a huge weight on my shoulders. So I entered my 20s wanting to charge the world and saying, okay, no one's going to bring us down. We've got, this Asian upbringing that's so rooted in education and monetary success that, during my teen years, I was hustling it out. I had to serve my family first. So I had, not one, not two, but 3 jobs to really support them as we were going through this very tumultuous, very crazy time. And, so when I decided that, I was like, okay, what does a Filipino Indian girl do in her career? Oh, she becomes either a doctor, dentist, lawyer, or engineer. So choose one of the 4.
You looked really far for that, didn't you? It was like you really had to really find that. There was a lot of research went into that.
Totally. Okay, dentist.
Aunties and uncles going, dentist, doctor, engineer.
Yes.
Lawyer at the worst.
And then it's kind of like you have like the ghost of your parents, like, okay, yes, it's like the mantra in your head, but it's like that programming of like when you're 5 years old or 6 years old, just thinking, how can I make them proud?
Of course.
So that was that mantra that I led all up into my 20s when, yes, shattered all of the traditional realms of success. Became a dentist, not just a dentist, but a cosmetic dentist. And, all of that was easy for me. The making money part, that was easy for me because I had to start very early
on.
And so all of that was all fine. But what really was the turning point was, I was 29 years old. It was December 31st. Actually, no, 28 years old, December 31st. And I was looking at my mirror. I was in a 5-story home at this point, living this dream life. I had been married. I had, this $1 million practice on the outside. Aunties and uncles were, of course, praising me, all of these things.
Telling all their kids
telling all their kids.
So they can be inspired by you.
Right, exactly. Well, follow Neeta. Look at what she's done. Lots of pressure, the pressure to be perfect, all of those things.
So intense.
And, for the first time in my life, that night, I looked in the mirror and I'm sobbing uncontrollably. I have clothes everywhere. I'm in my master bedroom and I'm just standing in the mirror for the first time. I'm actually looking at my soul. I'm like, how the heck did you get here? Like, what are you actually doing? Who are you doing this for? Because what I realized was I was actually living a lie. I was in a very, very toxic relationship. I wanted to recreate a family I'd lost. And so I was doing all of these things for, the external world, the showcase, the fancy cars, the travel, all of those things. But I didn't know who I was. And so it was that evening where I said, okay, you've been doing everything up until your entire life for everyone else. But you're not happy because from the outside, everything looked picture perfect. Yeah. But from the inside, I was spiritually dead, emotionally dead, and just burned out.
Do you think it was the burnout that brought that reckoning along?
Well, I'll be honest. I was in a very dangerous situation personally in my relationship, which kind of questioned everything. Right. And so in the following, months and years to come, for those first 3 months, I was living in and out of my BMW because I was so ashamed to tell my family. I was so ashamed to tell, the team of doctors that I had in my office. You were working with, so it was such a pivotal moment of strength. Because for the first time in my life, I can focus on me in that, everything being shattered. And in the years to come, I would leave the profession. I would sell my practice that was flourishing and doing all sorts of whatever. And I would focus on my own self-discovery journey. And, and I think that was, that December 31st was the biggest blessing, anyone could ever give me. My ex-husband was the biggest blessing I could ever have to learn about self-love.
Yeah.
And to learn how to then now serve love in different ways, because, in order to serve others, you need to serve yourself first. And I think that's the biggest journey we all can go through is, especially coming from an Asian background where we're taught, okay, happiness comes from serving your family first, And so that was really, the turning point of, okay, I started doing a lot of mentorship with females, lots of women's empowerment. I started a nonprofit. My transition into entrepreneurship was becoming an angel investor. At 29 years old, you have a lot of capital and you see what you're going through on your own personal journey. I wanted to help other women build their enterprises. Right. And I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what coaching or consulting was. I just knew that the more I started to live my truth, the more I started to travel around the world, and my geekiness of research and exploration kind of were coming through. It just took me to 45 different countries. And the more I got to see the different aspects of humanity, that's when you realize, okay, we all have similar stories. We all have similar journeys. We all have similar setbacks, failures, challenges. How do people resonate with that? How do people cope with that? How do people actually turn from victim to a thriver, which is what I talk about a lot now. Yeah. And so that's kind of what brought me to where we are now.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really deep. Thank you. Thank you. Going from that victim to that thriver is just like a really deep story in that. And obviously it's hard to skip over the idea of grit in that, and the amount of resilience that you've just shared in your story as well. So I'm not going to rob you of being able to introduce what grit is. What is grit to you?
Yeah, well, it's the ability to grow, reveal, innovate, and transform.
How good is that? It's grit. It's already like grit and resilience, right? And then it's an acronym as well. I love your shit.
Yeah. Parts of your life and every single day, because every single day we get to choose. And I think that coming from that very fragile state of being that victim and not really understanding our place. And, as humans, when we go through certain instances in our life, we don't realize how much of a gift there's in front of us until we start to reflect back, maybe a few years later or whatever. But, grit is really the tenacity to stick with something even when it is challenging, even when it is tough. And when I was doing my research, for myself, but also for whatever was this next evolution of me, which was writing my first book. Yeah. And it was really tying all of the pieces of my life and a lot of the things we don't learn in school about empathy, about leadership, about resilience, and what was the number one characteristic that came up from all successful people around the world, whether they were in Fortune whatever companies, or they were head of their household, or they were head of their communities, was their ability to bounce back from adversity and failure, which is actually resilience. And so that birthed this book that was really just in me that I had done all this research for. And
so that's another thing that I've been waiting to anchor in is like when you read Emotional Grit, this book is like, it's got reference after reference. It's written by a doctor basically, but it's really deep because it's talking about emotions and it's talking about a lot of like resilience, which can, like on one level be like fluffy sort of stuff, right? Yeah. But with all the hard science that you drop into it and you quote and you can go and research all that, it really anchors it in, you know, and I really respect the work that you've done there. It's really amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, yeah. No. I mean,
the research.
it was, you know, I think that merging both, you know, positive psychology, behavioral psychology, for me, it was really trying to understand how human beings operate in the world, because I had to do that when I was really young.
Really young, yeah.
You know, seeing, okay, how can I make my mother laugh when she's going through chemo at 10, 12, 14 years old, when she's in the ICU? What can we actually do? You know, it's trying to decipher that from a very intuitive perspective. And then, of course, you know, the first profession of my life was dentistry, you know. Started working at a dental office when I was 15 years old to help with the family. It was one of the jobs that I did. But really being able to dive into the fears that people have. I mean, people are afraid of dentists.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
totally. Coming in anxious and like,
So from those perspectives, because I always get the question, do you have any regrets? You know, would you have done that? Yeah. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, absolutely, 1000%. There's no question. There's no question at all, because I think that a lot of the things really inform who you are, what your soul takes shape, what you're actually meant to be doing in the world on so many levels. And sometimes the universe just tosses these lessons, and it's really up to you to really be able to kind of grab those nuggets and run with it for the next phase of whatever you wish to be doing in your life. And so emotional grit really has been kind of this opening to emotional leadership, which is, and resilience, because it's what the world is needing most with all of with where we are in today's time.
And I often think about this, you know, sometimes you come along these really potent messages and then the timing is just absolutely right. And I feel the same things, like, do you just consider yourself really blessed? I know it's hard to say that after obviously the context that we've just your story is really wild, but at the same time being able having the values of serving love, and then being able to share that with the context of what you've gone through obviously anchors in your message, your service that much deeper, and you can feel the heart in what you're doing, and then now's the time that the world needs that. It's more and more people, I think it was Jack Ma, the Alibaba, and he goes, the guy that runs Alibaba he's IQ's gone now.
It's all about EQ.
Yeah, it's all about EQ, and it's all about the emotional quotient and your heart quotient now. It's because these are the only things that the artificial intelligence that's coming won't be able to compute. Right?
Exactly.
And so this is what it's all about. And then you get a leader like yourself coming through with this potent message and this amazing context, which really supports the vision for what's to come. How does that, what's going on there? Do you ever just marvel at that?
I launched my book at a very pertinent time in the U.S. We were going through a really crazy election 2 years ago. And at the time I was working with a lot of leaders, and, the idea of, this fear-based leadership of let's get it done, let's go, no empathy. And then you have the Dalai Lama saying, well, empathy is one of the key characteristics in this world, and being able to empathize with other people's resilience or where other people have come from. That's the one thing that you can do for a leader. And, the premise of the book is to create heart-centered leadership, because we had gone so far from that within the political status of where we were. And I'm not going to get into all of that, but that climate was really fertile for this kind of a message. And since then, we've been on this amazing roller coaster journey of peeling away at, okay, let's serve love. Let's drop into a more heart-centered space. What does that look like? Well, how do you build resilience? What is grit? And of course, I use grit in the book as an acronym, of course, because we really need to recognize our own path first in order to help other people recognize theirs. It just makes the most sense in the research that, of course, I came, to find. And now, it's the third evolution of this is to now add more play, because there's so much of this intensity happening. You have all of these, we just found out loneliness is one of the
biggest killers.
Yeah. Loneliness, depression, suicide. And these are all kind of manifestations of negative emotions that are not taught to how to process, resolve, and, how to forgive, how to reflect, how to remove. And of course that can relate to manifesting disease in the body. And so we're really, really excited of where we're at this juncture in time.
Yeah, it's really a gift to just be able to sit with the depth of conversation that we can have based on, everything that you guys have gone through. And it's interesting because this essence of play. So, again and again, I think something that we're going to have to keep going back to is context, just because it's such a deep, I guess your message is really potent, but the context when it just anchors that in so much deeper, and almost wish it wasn't so, but it really is the case, right? And so deepening in that anchor for play, right? So Neeta went and married a G, is it 8 times now, or is it 7?
Well, we were gonna get married in Greece actually and make it 9, but it's been 8. So there's a
married 9
story.
times. It's not like she's in an indoctrinated culture and she has to be married to someone to really be really good friends with them. She's married the same person
8 times. 8 times.
But what a person, guys.
So, it's interesting because for those listeners that are listening, that have had, gone through something very tumultuous and just crazy, there's light again. Yeah. And that light is so beautiful when you just recognize who you are as a human being. And when my co-creator now in life, Ajit, when we met, and we met at, some of the same events that you and I have met at. And so this was kind of a seed that was dropped 5 years ago, and we didn't really get to connect until maybe 2 years into knowing each other. And yeah, when you're ready, when you're open to loving yourself, the whole world kind of co-conspires to actually kind of make that happen for you. And so we got married in all different parts of the world, starting with, we're in Tallinn, Estonia, starting with Tallinn, Estonia, where we got these amazing union symbols. Yeah. And the premise of the symbol is to serve infinite love to each other, but with the capacity to go through the dark and the light times of life, always moving forward with the potential for growth. So there's a space for growth here.
Dude,
and always interconnected. Yeah.
That is beautiful.
So, and for those of you watching on YouTube, there it is.
Yo.
Yeah. So, I think that, this second time around for both of us, because he had also been in a long-term relationship as well, we were very intentional. We were very intentional. We wanted to play like kids, and our highest values were serving love and play.
So talking about intentional, this is the couple that will go away, put themselves on a retreat, just the two of them, and just rash and riff over values and what it is they really want to do, and stuff like serve love comes to the primary surface, but they'll incubate themselves with each other to really figure out what's going on. So
for 3 to 4 days, at a time.
It's amazing.
We do it twice a year.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's so important, especially if you want to deepen any sort of relationship, whether it's a personal relationship, love relationship, friendship, or business partnership. You know, the depth of that, turns into what you wish to create. Yep. And for us, it was so important for us to create a foundation, because I knew I wanted to step into working with and being with and, living life with, a life partner. And so that's, so we did one ceremony at Burning Man. And, of course, one for our families in Mumbai, and one, we did a very spiritual ceremony with cacao, actually, as well. Yeah.
That's 3. She's not giving the other ones away. Did you see that? There's still 5 more we've got to get out of her. So maybe get in touch with her after the episode, find out more. But yeah, I absolutely, again, again and again, the context of that, really going from, really the depth of the intensity of stuff that you went through, and then now finding that plate. And then for me, again, just there's an even deeper message in that about just busting through stuff that doesn't the higher
doesn't matter.
Archaic system of marriage. I can only get married once. It's going to be to the right person, and it's if you found the right person, marry him again and again and again and again. And I feel that's something that when you meet yourself and Ajit and face value, you just see 2 people that are very assimilated, very obviously heaps of fun to interconnect with, but then your values are really deep, and you've really challenged a lot of conventional thought. Obviously yourself being the analytical one, and obviously Ajit has that nature as well, and you guys have really peeled back a lot of the stuff that society tells us that really is just construct.
Totally. It's construct to keep you in a box.
Yeah.
And I think that, being so aware of that, or woke, or whatever we want to call it, gives you the ability to really check yourself. Because, for us, like I said, one of our ceremonies was just getting a tattoo, but that was a symbol that meant so much to us.
Of course.
And, I think that we can think of, being intentional in our own lives in different ways, and how can you bring that magic to your relationships, whatever they are, to make it that more meaningful and special.
Love it. So throughout grow, reveal, innovate, transform.
Yeah.
So this I can see that for me, I'm fascinated by this, because I can see that your life generally goes on a meta level this way as well, right? So you initially grow, and then you reveal parts of what your growth was, and then you innovate, and then you transform that again, and I can almost see that would be this cyclic thing.
It's cyclical. You never stop. You never stop growing, and you never stop within the cycle. You never stop within the seasons of life. We have different seasons of where we are, different phases. Right now I'm 6 months pregnant. And we're expanding our family. And I think that, for any of you,
growing.
we're growing and transforming at the same time. If you are building your EQ or your self-awareness, the first part is to be open to growth. And when we talk about growth or growing, it's you got to be open. If you're closed to it, nothing is going to change. You're going to keep going in the same circles. And then the next level of that is, okay, when you're ready to reveal, you're ready to accept where you are, where you are on this platform. I accept that I'm not happy in my current job, or I'm not happy in my current situation. I'm not happy where I am. And so from that point, from that state, you can start to innovate. And when you innovate, which is the third level of grit, it really is to take action. It's to commit. It's to commit to take action. So if you're ready to change, because change is really a part of life, we're constantly evolving. And, it first takes the hardest step is to be open to that growth. When you're open to that growth, then you can accept where you are, and then you can innovate so that you can commit to a particular change. And then the last part is the transformation, because you've already done those steps in order to, okay, now we're ready to take action. What do I need to do? Do I need to put in my resignation? Do I need to start the podcast? Do I need to apply for a TEDx or whatever, work with my business partner on the next 5 years of whatever we want to create together, or just start the process of writing your book. But that is, of course, it is cyclical, and you couldn't have said it in a more beautiful fashion.
So my questions are just to try and support those that are listening then. How, what is, in your opinion, the best way to initially, open? Like, I know there's a myriad of ways of going about it, but
I think that we judge ourselves so much. And the judgment of our self-critic, our self-talk, limits what we are capable of doing. I always say, you are your biggest block, always. So if you are your biggest block always in starting new things, in doing new things, in getting things done, then you will have to surrender to whatever that fear is in order to be open to growing. Right. So we need to surrender to whatever that fear is that could be holding us back, whether it's fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of worthiness, fear of inadequacies. We're just going deep.
I love that. I love that. And so what you're suggesting is weaving into the fear, right?
Yeah, because the first part is being aware of the fear. So many times we do things, but we have no idea where some of the judgment in ourselves, the critic, the tension in our bodies, we don't even know where that's coming from. We just do it anyways. Or we distract ourselves with food and other enhancements and things like that to distract ourselves so we can get it done. But if we pay more attention where that fear is coming from, why we're procrastinating to get a particular thing done, why we're procrastinating to quit that lousy job where you hate and you keep going to day after day, then you'll never really actualize your fullest potential. So in order to even just be open to growth, it's to really look behind it and say, wow, okay, I'm going to surrender into this fear. What does that fear look like? I mean, you could write this down right now. What is that fear that I'm so afraid of? To
give people some context, for me, just last year, I'd been debating leaving my job for about 2 years at that point, right? And my biggest fear, and I just realized that was my fear. It was like this fear of uncertainty, basically. Yes. I had so much security in my job and it paid really well. And I was like, these are some of the best opportunities ever. Little side note, that when you leave your job, now you're overwhelmed with opportunities.
Oh, yes.
When they don't tell you that, they're like, oh, you've got this amazing job, this amazing opportunity. And I remember that fear, I remember that state. And it was really profound because something you said was accept and commit. And I really want to talk about acceptance. But this was really profound for me personally, when it was just the actual definition of courage came to me. Because I thought you were meant to live life fearlessly, and I thought courage was fearlessness, and it wasn't. To be courageous is to have fear, but take action anyway. In the face of fear, that's actual courage.
That's so true.
And when I heard that, I was like, oh snap! This is I can feel the fear. And this is what it means to be courageous, to show up as not even in need of a better word, but let's call it a warrior in today's society, right? Yeah. It's okay, so I'm going to have to take the courage to show up the way that I need to be, to pull the plug on what I have known is not serving me, but I'm just afraid of leaving it.
Right.
And it was such an intense process. But then just meditating on what courage actually meant, really just disseminating that was huge. So I totally understand what you're saying about being that openness and moving just appreciating your fears for what they are, and then I think that's a nice little segue into acceptance, right?
Oh, so good. So good. Because when you are open to those fears and you take action anyways, then you're actually able to accept your current reality. Yeah. What does your reality look like right now? Okay, I'm overweight by 20 pounds. I'm in this toxic relationship. I have no idea what I'm going to do next. And that is terrifying. Yeah. Or I have too many ideas and I don't know how to pick one, and that's terrifying. Yeah. It's intense.
It sounds like a blessing, but it's also quite intense.
And I think that with that awareness, we are able to accept where we are, because from that place, doesn't matter how high or how low that place is of acceptance, we can then now reveal new parts of ourselves that's willing to emerge simply because you just gave yourself permission to accept where you are.
Yep. Yeah. Sounds easier than it is.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's almost that self-love piece kicking in a little bit as well, right?
Totally. Being able to decipher what you like, what your non-negotiables are, what your boundaries are. This is all part of accepting who you are. You know, so many times we're blinded by, you know, social media and what that person's doing, what that person's doing. We don't realize, okay, I'm on my journey. I'm on my journey right now. I'm here and now. I'm just starting out my show, my podcast, my writing, my coaching business, whatever that is, especially if you're starting out a new entrepreneurial endeavor. Yeah. You know, these are the types of things that I get to hear a lot. Yeah. And, you know, but you want to be here right away. Everyone wants to be here.
I'm taking action.
Everyone wants to be at the top of the mountain right away. Yeah. And you know, we do this with celebrities or people who we think that we idolize who have made it. But we don't realize that, you know, greatness is not built overnight. Greatness is built in the long haul. And for those who have left corporate, who have left their, you know, successful jobs or careers, you know, you went over one peak of a mountain, and now you're going back down that peak. But who's to say that next peak that you're supposed to reach, that might be higher?
Probably is.
And it is, because you wouldn't have left the other one if you weren't courageous enough to start the next one. Yeah. And, you know, I think that so many people want to scale that mountain like yesterday. Yeah. But we need to accept those parts of ourselves, because otherwise you will run into burnout. You will run into, you know, paradox of choice, because there's so many things running at you. And to really enjoy the journey of what that looks like, but really allow yourself and give yourself permission. And I think we're so excited and passionate to get it done that we don't really take the time to say, okay, this is where I'm at. And that's actually okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that wisdom, sister. Thank you so much for anchoring that in. So to commit makes sense. To take action from that space makes a lot of sense. For those that are like inhibited from taking action, any advice? Like, I know you guys have been super supportive, even just for me, like just having that anchor and just go out there and share love, like, you know, just literally serve love. And that for me has been like such an empowering like action statement, you know. It's just like, well, like all this idea of like it's got to be like this, or it's got to look like that, and it's got to be like this, and it's like, man, that's so mental and so heady in the constructs. But as soon as you drop into, it's going to get woo-woo, but as soon as you drop into the heart, right, and it's just like, let's just share love, right, so let's just serve love, it just becomes so easy. It's just like, just do whatever you would want to do, and then you just share from that. So can we have a little bit of a taking action and what that means?
So for those not so woo-woo, what we're talking about is, we talked a lot about serving love and what that actually means, because I get this a lot, you know. So it really is service first, service first without any expectation. And when you're giving value, when you're driving value without expectation on the other side, there's so much that you can learn about yourself. There's so much you can learn about your skills. There's so much you can learn about the other person. And that gives valuable feedback. Whether you're building a business or trying to figure out what your next passion is, it comes from that value. What value are you going to give? And so, this happens a lot when, let's say, for instance, if I'm coaching speakers or people that want to be on stage, or want to share their story or their message in a big way. So they get crippled because, public speaking is one of the biggest fears, right? And so the idea, and this is a great example because maybe some of you are listening to this and I say public speaking and you're like, what? Yeah. But you have such a message to share. So in this primal example, you have to think of, okay, if there's one person in that audience, just that one person that will benefit from what you are sharing, then you are just talking to that person. You're sharing your story with so much value, with so much love, with so much heart, with so much passion, with so much enthusiasm that person walks away with, all of the goodness that you're giving. So this is just an example of changing your mindset into, okay, I'm just going to focus on that. I'm not going to focus on, oh my gosh, I'm up on stage. How do I look? Am I going to fall on my face? Am I going to forget what I'm going to say? There's all those fears, all of those fears that block you from, of course, taking action. Now, the same type of fears will, come up when you're trying to start a business or when you're wanting to leave a job. You've got one foot in and one foot out. But what value add are you going to actually serve?
I like how grounded you put that. So thank you. And that was such a beautiful metaphor because even I think it's really easy to identify that. Like everything you were saying, like, what about this? What are they going to think? How do I look? And this is why I was being all woo-woo about it because that sounds like mental chit-chatter.
All the time. And we all have that.
Right? But then when you anchor it in, just connect with that one person that really, you just they maybe really need to hear what it is that you have to share because they can relate to your journey, your story. And, I remember when for me, I struggled, my biggest challenge was I struggled with depression for 5 to 7 years. And sitting in the psychologist's office and being diagnosed with this, it was a double-edged sword. Obviously you're being diagnosed with something, but as soon as she labeled it as depression, it was just and then she said, it's okay. Many people have this. I realized just how much that just took. It didn't even just take pressure out of the kettle. It just opened up the lid, and it was just steam just started flowing out. Totally. It was just the pressure started leaving because it was I'm not alone. I'm not alone. It's completely normal to feel like this. There are other people that are going through this, and I think when you anchor into that intention of just sharing your story because other people can relate, and there's something in there. It's just so refreshing to feel that connection and in it together.
So good.
In transformation, I'm conscious of the time.
Yes,
talk
of
to
course.
you forever.
I know. I want to be conscious. Of the time.
So transformation. Is there a standout transformation? I know your story has been a lot, but is there a story of transformation that you really want to share that for yourself?
Oh wow, so many.
Yeah.
Oh wow, so many. I think
the author of Grit and Cycles.
So many, and of course you guys heard my story. I think that it is that hero's journey, right? Joseph Campbell talks about it. Yeah. So much of, wherever you are at right now, we are always going to be evolving, and we're always going to have so many different facets and phases and seasons of our lives, where you may think that there's despair, desperation, hope is gone. I can share a story of a friend client who was going through a really rough time. Nothing bad has ever happened in her life. So she says, right? And, 2 beautiful kids, married, all of these things, getting into her 40s. And one day her husband just drops dead, leaving her with 2 kids. And so I'm sharing this as an example of, there can be different seasons of our life. Mm-hmm. And for her now, talking with her 6 months into the process of grieving and trying to make sense of everything, because there's no reason. He wasn't sick. He was healthy. He was ready to transition. Mm-hmm. And, she said that day, a part of me died. Yeah. But now there's this new aspect of me that's born. Mm. So if we can kind of take that as a metaphor of, there are aspects of yourself that are willing to be birthed right now. Yeah. And what does that transformation look like for you? Mm. When we leave a job, that's a rebirth. When we leave a relationship, that's a rebirth. When we decide we want to take action and start our business, even though we're scared, we're scared shitless, that's a rebirth. So, and that's part of that whole transformation. What is it going to be for you? And what does that look like for you? Because for every person, it is that hero's journey, is to really pay attention to that, not be a victim, but how do you survive and then thrive as a result? Because, this is the beautiful journey of life that we're on. And that's how we inspire evolution.
Man, thank you so much. Like, Neeta, not just for showing up today and obviously sharing your wisdom, and like I'm grateful for that, and so is everybody else listening into this. Mm-hmm. But also, like, again, we touched on this lightly in the podcast, but just, you showing up so presently with the context of your life, and then finding the gems of your life so you can actually serve humanity and serve love through that. Just watching from a meta level, there is just so much to learn from you, and so much to be taken on in that. And then, you've consciously gone ahead and created these little gems like, Emotional Grit and the Book of Coaching, and now Grit TV as well. And it's nice and playful. And it's been really, now to really understand the journey and like where all the inspirations are coming from. So I really want to extend gratitude into your past as well for everything that you've shown up with.
Thank you.
And just, really gratitude for the future as well, because I know you're doing amazing work, and I'm really grateful for where it's all going, and just blessings on the journey. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Amrit. This has been such a wisdom gem-filled hour. And so much fun in the process.
My last question, and by no means my least question, is beyond the skin suit, beyond the title, beyond all the stories, who is Neeta?
Yes. She loves to dance.
Nice.
She loves to dance. She loves to explore and adventure and play.
Yo, that's so poetic and beautiful. So much flow in that. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Amrit. This is amazing.
For those wanting to drop into Neeta, what's the easiest way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, everything is on neetabhushan.com. And if you
spell that for those
listening? Yeah, sure. It's NeetaBhushan.com. You can also look at schoolofgrit.tv, schoolofgrit.tv, and that'll direct you to
heaps
everything.
Of fun stuff. Because transformation can be fun.
Totally.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Love of the Inspired Evolution and sharing the Love of the Inspired Evolution. If you feel like this content has supported you, or may support anyone else that you know may resonate with the content of it, please share away and share the love around. Thank you guys so much. And to stay up to date on whatever's coming out with the Inspired Evolution, please subscribe. There's all these links in the bio for you to tune into the episodes and all these different platforms, just so that message can get to you and your loved ones. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Stay inspired to evolve.